Hello, I'm Martha Senator, and this is Listen and Be Heard. Today we'll hear an archived interview of Nora Okja Keller from 1997 when her book Comfort Woman had first come out. We'll also hear some poetry and interviews that Tony Robles recorded last week in Manilatown in San Francisco. We'll talk a little bit about the craft of writing and another spoken word finale for your listening pleasure. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Martha, how are you? I'm doing fine.
You've been in San Francisco Bay Area in the last week.
Yes, it was a 7-day trip. 5 of those days were battling a cold.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, the weather difference and the time difference, coming from North Carolina where it was in the high 80s and then hitting San Francisco where it was the low to the mid 50s plus wind. It's
hard to adjust, We're not getting any younger either.
I was thinking about that earlier, traveling, how it's a little bit more difficult now. And then I just thought about, seniors, how much more difficult it must be for seniors who want to travel, but, have to overcome different physical conditions and ailments.
It's stressful, but knowing you got around anyway and heard some things and did some things out there.
I'm on the board of an organization that my late uncle Al Robles helped found. It's called the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. And, the whole purpose of it is to promote the culture and the history of Filipino Americans, because we do have a long and rich history in this country. So, with organizations, they need to, get together and strategize and, plan for the future. So that's basically what we did. I miss the food. I mean, that's the one thing this one trip really showed me is how much I miss the food. It was just wonderful.
Well, San Francisco, I mean, everybody loves the food in San Francisco, and I guess it means different things to different people. I imagine it's hard for you to find some of that Filipino food around Hendersonville.
Well, Filipino food, Japanese food, Korean food, Eritrean food, just everything that they have there. I was in Japantown, actually. I was staying at a hotel there. And there was an excellent Chinese restaurant right across the street, an excellent Korean restaurant right across the street, and a lot of wonderful, Japanese restaurants. They even had fusion where you had Latino. There was a Latino Japanese restaurant, or a Peruvian Japanese restaurant. So there's a little bit of Japanese with some Peruvian, and they were
people have been mixing it up with each other for a very, very long time, haven't they?
Yeah.
But what about the poetry, Tony?
I got to spend some time with a wonderful poet named Shirley Anchetta, who is from Watsonville, and she's the widow of the late Jeff Tagami, who was a very important poet in the Asian American and the Filipino American canon. He wrote a book called October Light, and it really was a chronicle of the history of Filipino Americans on the farms, and him coming from the farms and having worked in the farms as a younger person. It was a wonderful book, and his wife is an accomplished poet as well, Shirley, and we both performed at the Manilatown Center. We performed some of our poetry, and that was great.
We'll be hearing a little bit of that later in the program as well.
Yes.
And moving on, 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 and moving on.
I did an interview with Nora Okja Keller on WBAI radio when her book Comfort Woman had just come out in 1997. It won the American Book Award and the Elliott Cades Award. Chapter 2 of the book was previously published as a short story called Mother Tongue, which won the Pushcart Prize in 1995. Trigger warning. The subject matter describes traumatic events.
The baby I could keep came when I was already dead. I was 12 when I was murdered, 14 when I looked into the Yalu River, and finding no face looking back at me, knew that I was dead. I wanted to let the Yalu's currents carry my body to where it might find my spirit again, but the Japanese soldiers hurried me across the bridge before I could jump. I did not let them get too close. I knew they would see the name and number stenciled across my jacket and send me back to the camps, where they think nothing of using a dead girl's body. When the guards started to step toward me, I knew enough to walk on, to wave them back to their post, where they would watch for other Koreans with that special look in their eyes. Before the Japanese government posted the soldiers, for the good of the Koreans, they said, the bridge over the Yalu had been a popular suicide spot. My body moved on. That is why, 20 years after it left my spirit behind at the recreation camp, my body was able to have this baby. Even the doctor here say it is almost a miracle. The camp doctor said I would never have a living child after he took my first one out, my insides too bruised and battered, impossible to properly heal.
This is Martha Senator for WBAI Radio 99.5 FM, and I'm here with Nora Okja Keller. She is the author of Comfort Woman, a novel which is dealing with some very strong themes. One of them is, of course, the mother-daughter, and also it's about the story of a comfort woman. Can you tell us in sort of a nutshell what the book is about?
Well, it's essentially, as you mentioned, a mother-daughter story with the voices of both the mother and daughter taking turns telling the story. The novel begins in Korea during World War II when the mother, as a young girl, is taken into the comfort camps by the Japanese soldiers and forced into sexual slavery. The story continues on to present day in Hawaii, where her daughter, American-born Becca, discovers this part of her mother's history only after the mother's death. And in doing so, Becca comes to a greater place of compassion for her mother, a greater sense of understanding for this woman who she always thought was crazy or given to insane bouts of trances and spells.
Mm-hmm. It's also the story of a Korean-American girl growing up, mm-hmm. I think, and trying to understand her roots and her background. Is that also, do you think, an accurate reading?
I think so, and I think part of the book is maybe it's not so much her struggle to come to acceptance to it, because during the first part of the novel, I think Becca struggles against it. She kind of denies her mother. She denies the Korean, what she sees as the Koreanness of her mother, the foreignness of her mother. And it's only at the end that she comes to some kind of understanding for her mother. Mm-hmm. And that way she comes to some sort of peace within herself.
It's not exactly a story of a particular woman, but it's based on the experiences that we're finding out about from the war. It struck me that somehow, this is from a particular war and a particular experience, but somehow the unsung heroines of many wars, I think this is a story of the female side of what happens during wartime. And so often I think one of the big problems with these stories is that the women who experience them don't particularly want to talk about their experiences. Do you consider them heroines of a war? I mean, how would you talk about these women and place them in history?
I think that's a beautiful way to put it, and that's so true that there was so much silence surrounding the whole issue of comfort women, and it's only been within the past few years that the women who survived the comfort camps have begun speaking out, like in Korea, China, Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia. They're all beginning to speak out now. And it's, it's about 50 years before they started speaking out. And I think it's so incredibly brave of them to come forward and speak out now. I think when you speak out about something or you tell a story about something, it brings back that event, the trauma, so that each time you tell the story, you relive it in a sense. It becomes emotionally real again. So I think it's very brave and very moving that they're all beginning to talk.
Mm-hmm. What ramifications does this have for all of us? I mean, when we speak about war heroes, men that go to war, many of those Japanese men that were in those soldiers went home to their wives and their families. So there's all sorts of different ramifications of just accepting the reality of those camps, both for the Japanese and for the Koreans. Do you think that your book is playing a role in this, or do you prefer not to step into that kind of role?
I don't know what role this book plays. I mean, I don't. When women talk about war, just to kind of address that whole thing about the way men and women tell stories about the war, women don't glorify war. This book started because I heard a woman who survived the camps tell her story. She told her story. She was about 70 years old, and she said she had decided to speak out after all these years because, well, for one, any family that she might have had left had died, and so there was no one to shame. So she carried shame about this, what had happened to her, and this guilt about what had happened to her, and also anger that she had lost her life in that camp. But she also said she was speaking out because before she died, she wanted to speak the truth and to bear witness for all the women who had died during the war. And her estimate was, there were about between 100 to 200,000 women taken into the camps. About 90% died in the camps. And so she said her reason for speaking out was to demand justice for those women who had died, who didn't survive, and to make sure that something like this became a part of history so that we could fight against it, fight against something like that ever happening again.
So the first thing to do is to admit that it was real and that it happened. And
exactly, and to make people aware that happened. And she was traveling, this woman was traveling to different countries and speaking at universities and speaking at, symposiums, in part to demand an apology from the Japanese government. Because at that time in the early 90s, the Japanese government was denying any, first, that there was any such thing as the comfort camps. And, secondly, that if there were, they had nothing to do with it, right? So, but since then they have admitted that there were camps and that they were government sanctioned.
But it's been pretty limited, really, what they've done, hasn't it?
Right. They have not offered compensation. Whatever compensation came through Japan came from individual sources and private enterprises. And even that, I've since heard, has started to dry up from lack of interest, lack of support.
The young woman in the story, the daughter, she's growing up as an American and not only overwhelmed with what she perceives as her mother's craziness, but also taking in bits and pieces of Korean culture from her mother. I'm wondering what your experience is as a Korean American and how you've sort of brought the two cultures together in your own mind.
In some ways, my childhood parallels Becca's in that as I was growing up, when my family first came to America, my mother, it was first in places like Minnesota, Ohio, Florida. So there weren't very many Korean people my mother could talk to. And she was very conscious of her what she saw as her language disability or her barriers. And she didn't want to teach me Korean language because she felt like I would be stigmatized. And so she was very insistent or she believed that the best thing for me was to bring me up, quote unquote, purely American. And so I grew up for many years without knowing very much about Korean language or Korean culture. And when I hit the point of adolescence, everybody goes through a period where you rebel against your parents and you think, oh, my parent is so geeky, and you just want to have nothing to do with them. So my rebellion against my mother was also in part a rebellion against any part of me that was Korean identity through writing. And I think it's in my writing, too, that I've been able to go back. My work involves like the Korean aspects of this joining American and Korean, this whole process of kind of bridging that Korean American identity, because that's what I've tried to do and tried to go back and reconstruct it so that my writing becomes a way that I can go back and reclaim, what I had denied for so long.
Mm-hmm. What would be, this is an interesting question, I think, for me and for many writers. You're writing novels, and you're pulling in Korean culture into what you're doing. You're also using American and European culture and so on. And there's many writers doing that from many different backgrounds. Where do you see yourself fitting in as a writer, and where do you see writing going in this very multicultural sort of melting literary pot that's going on in America when you think of yourself and women like Anna Castillo, Kate Horsley, just to name a few? There's so many from many different backgrounds who are writing very powerful novels.
I think we're at a very exciting time. But I remember when I was growing up and going to school, I didn't read any of these, what we call ethnic literature or writing. And so I really grew up believing that writers were like Ernest Hemingway and John Steinbeck and, Faulkner, a white male.
Right.
And that was what American literature was. So that when I hit college and I read Maxine Hong Kingston's Woman Warrior for the first time, it was like a knock on the head. It really opened my eyes, and I said, there are other kinds of writers out there, writers whose experiences parallel mine in some ways, who don't look white, don't look male, or don't, who look more like me. So I really began on this quest to search out writers who I felt a certain affinity with. And I just began feeding myself, consuming all this writing. And I really looked towards writers. I looked for Korean American writers like Teresa Cha. I read Peter Hyun's Monse, Clay Walls by Kim Ron Young, Kathy Song's Picture Bride. So I fed myself Korean American, but not to limit to Asian American. I also really read a lot of Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Gloria Naylor, and when I look back on all this intense reading that I did, I really feel like I was creating a type of literary genealogy, like a personal or literary family tree, and I can say that I could draw on for what would later become my own writing.
Mm-hmm. What are you up to now? This book is published. It's out. You're traveling around promoting it, but I imagine that you're working on something new.
Yes, I have started a second one, and I started it shortly after I finished Comfort Woman, and I started writing it, and I've just started chapter 1, but chapter 1 started getting more and more complicated, and it was like 75 pages long, and it's chapter 1, but there's all these people, more subplots and more subtext. Then I finally realized that it was actually should be 2 novels. So what I've been doing lately is kind of an operation to separate Siamese twins, placing some characters that belong in one story in one book, and then putting the other characters in a third book, and trying to find out which places and which themes belong in which book.
So we can expect 2 books to be coming up.
I hope so. Knock on wood.
Okay. How have people been responding to this book? You've been going out and reading. What kind of audiences are you getting, and how are they talking to you about the book?
Yeah, that's been the best part about this, though, going around and doing the readings, because I can meet the people who are actually reading the book. And, I've heard different people have categorized my book in certain ways. Like, I don't mean the people I meet, but in media has categorized my book in certain ways, like, Asian American book or woman's book. But when I go out to the readings and I see the people who are actually there, I've been really happy to see that it's been a mix of people. In one sense, I've heard people say, "Oh, it's just a woman's book," but then I see men in the audience, so that's very nice. And then I see just a big mix of different people, and it's really nice to have them come up and say, "I've read this book and I really relate to it in this way." And it's fascinating to me to see all the different ways that people have made connections to this book. Like, some people connect to it, feel a real connection with the mother-daughter story. And other people will say, "Oh, I like the historical aspect of the novel." And other people will feel like they enjoy the mystical or the spiritual aspects of the novel. Then another person will say, "Oh, the feminist, I really read it as feminist." So it's been fun to see the ways that they come to this novel and the relationship they make to this book.
Let's talk about that mystical aspect for a moment. The mother really goes off into a world of her own sometimes. But when she does, she's drawing on, in a way, what little she knew of Korean culture, because she was very young when she was brought into the camp, and she didn't have the benefit of instruction in her family instilling whatever values into her. So it almost struck me as a sort of improvised culture that she used for herself, to hold herself up. And perhaps that's a bit of what any Korean American was doing.
That's exactly
anyway.
Right.
So maybe you could talk a little about some of those aspects of the mysticism and the spirituality.
Sure. When Akiko leaves the camp, she feels like she is so dead to the girl that she was, Sunhyo, before she entered the camp. So because of this feeling like she's so dislocated from the physical world, she feels like she can go into the spirit world. And the spirits from the camp, all the women who had died during the camp, follow her throughout her life. And I tried to parallel her experiences of her spirit travel with the Korean tradition of woman shamans. And Korea has this really long, centuries old and fascinating tradition of shamanism. And in Korea, only the women can be shamans, so that the few handful of men that are shamans have to become transvestite. They have to dress as women and talk as women, speak as women, to lure the spirits down. So, but all the women that feel like they have been called to shamanism all experience this type of dislocation from life. Like they've experienced some sort of trauma, either like a physical sickness, an emotional trauma, or something that separates them from their body for a while. And they feel like that has left an opening in them to let the spirits come in to talk through their bodies. So I tried to parallel Kiko's experience with the traditional initiation into shamanism.
Well, that was a very powerful part of the book. And I have to say, when I came to the end, I was crying. The book really moved me, but it's not simply a tragedy. I think there's a message of hope in there. Well, I'd like to give you a chance to just say a few words about what you would like to say about the book, if there's anything that I've left unsaid.
I feel like I don't want to interfere with the relationship that each reader comes to the book with. I mean, like I said, it's so varied and it's so individual. I don't like to tell people, "Oh, this is how the book should be read," or "This is what I meant when I said this." I'm more interested in people coming with their own interpretation and their own insight into the book. And I feel that connection between the reader and a text is it's almost sacred in a way, and it should be, honored as, that kind of personal relationship should be honored.
Do you see yourself in some way in that role as a shaman?
That's a really interesting question, because as I was writing this, I really felt that sometimes that I entered a type of trance, that I was really connected to something higher than myself. And that when I was really intensely focused on the writing, I lost myself in a sense and became so infused with the book, and just, it was like I was almost like a medium. It was really an intense experience in that. Yeah.
Okay, well, you've been listening to Nora Okja Keller. I want to thank you for your time. My name is Martha Senator, and this is WBAI Radio 99.5 FM.
When the missionaries found me, they thought I was Japanese because of the name, Akiko, sewn onto the sack that was my dress. The number, 41, they weren't sure about and thought, perhaps an orphanage. They asked me, in Korean, Japanese, Chinese, where I came from, who my family was, but by then I had no voice and could only stand dumbly in front of their moving mouths as they lifted my arms, poke at my teeth and into my ears, wipe the dirt from my face. She is like the wild child raised by tigers, I heard them say to each other, physically human, but able to speak only in the language of animals. They were kind, though, and praised me when I responded to simple commands they issued in Japanese. Sit, eat, sleep. Had they asked, I would also have responded to closed mouth and open legs. At the camps where the Japanese called us Jungun Ianfu, military comfort women, we were taught only whatever was necessary to service the soldiers. Other than that, we were not expected to understand and were forbidden to speak any language at all. But we were fast learners and creative, listening as we gathered the soldiers' clothes for washing or cooked their meals. We were able to surmise when troops were coming in and how many we were expected to serve. We taught ourselves to communicate through eye movements, body posture, tilts of the head, or when we could not see each other, through the rhythmic rustlings between our stalls. In this way, we could speak. In this way, we kept our sanity. To this day, I do not think Induk, the woman who was the Akiko before me, cracked. Most of the other women thought she did, because she would not shut up. One night, she talked loud and non-stop. In Korean and in Japanese, she denounced the soldiers, yelling at them to stop their invasion of her country and her body. Even as they mounted her, she shouted, I am Korea. I am a woman. I am alive. I am 17. I had a family just like you do. I am a daughter. I am a sister. Men left her stall quickly, some crying, most angrily joining the line for the woman next door. All through the night she talked, reclaiming her Korean name, reciting her family genealogy, even chanting the recipes her mother had passed on to her. Just before daybreak, they took her out of her stall and into the woods, where we couldn't hear her anymore. They brought her back skewered, from her vagina to her mouth, like a pig ready for roasting. A lesson, they told the rest of us, warning us into silence. That night, it was as if 1,000 frogs encircled the camp. They opened their throats for us, swallowed our tears, and cried for us. All night, it seemed, they called, Induk, 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 so we would never forget. Although I might have imagined the frogs, that was my first night as the new Akiko. I was given her clothes which were too big and made the soldiers laugh. The new P won't be wearing them much anyway, they jeered, fresh poji. Even though I had not yet had my first bleeding, I was auctioned off to the highest bidder. After that, it was a free-for-all, and I thought I would never stop bleeding. That is how I know Induk did not go crazy. She was going sane. She was planning her escape. The corpse the soldiers brought back from the woods wasn't Induk. It was Akiko 4-1. It was me.
This is WPVM LP 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. The show is Listen and Be Heard, and my name is Martha Senator. We were listening to an archive interview from 1997 of Nora Okja Keller about her book Comfort Woman and some of her reading from the book. She had a follow-up novel that came out in the early 2000s called Fox Girl. We are going to go now from the Korea of yesteryear to Manilatown, San Francisco, just last week, when Tony Robles participated in a poetry reading there and spoke to Lou Sakia, Kenny Lee, and the education director of the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. We'll also hear some poetry from Jeanette Lazam and Lou Sakia.
Hi, this is Tony Robles, Listen and Be Heard Radio. I am in San Francisco, California, my birthplace, and I'm on a short vacation, and I am talking to an author right now who is working on a book of his brother, his late brother's poetry. Lou Sakia, poet from San Francisco, and he's working on this wonderful collection. Lou, thank you for being on our show and agreeing to be interviewed. Can you tell us about this upcoming book of your brother's poetry?
It's been in the works for some time now, and it's only this year that I said, okay, we're not getting any younger, and we have to do it now, because the fact of the matter is that it's his 50th, it's the 50th anniversary since he passed away. He would have been actually 50th since 1973 he passed away. He would have been 80 years old. But so he died when he was only 30 years old of a brain tumor. But he was like a signpost along the road for me, you know, and I really got to know him better, ironically, after he passed away, because I got a lot of his writing, unpublished stuff, because he was anthologized, and he did edit one of the first Filipino American poetry anthologies called Flips. It was like a chapbook. But now I want to do a book that will bring out all, you know, so much of his writing, and I feel he deserves a broader audience, and the issues that he brought out in his book are still relevant today. I'm fortunate to have Tony do the introduction for this book, and I hope to get it done by the end of this year, if everything works out all right.
Your brother's name was Seraphin Sakia. His friends knew him as Surf. Mm-hmm. He came up during the time of ethnic studies at San Francisco State. He was part of the creative writing department. Can you talk about the importance of San Francisco as a setting to his work, and why the poetry community should remember him? What should they know about his work as a poet, his literary work?
Well, I think he was able to get together with a lot of other writers, not just Filipino, but different writers of color, Latino, Black, Native American, and other Asian Americans. And they had a group called Third World Communications. And this was a time when I think people of color were starting to learn more about their own contributions to this society, and they were starting to come out with their writing, their art, their music. Well, they always had the music, but with their literature was starting to come out, and writing about stories of like for Filipinos, it's writing about a lot of the Manongs, the old timers, the first generation who came here, and kind of be a voice for the voiceless. And also at that time, it was, like I said, the identity thing of asserting your own identity and telling our stories, and not letting other people tell our stories, but letting us tell our own stories. And so it was important time, the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, where he came out. And like I said, he was one of many voices who started coming out during that time. And it's just unfortunate that he passed away at such an early age. But I think, his writing, again, should be brought out to that larger audience. And from what I've heard from other people who have read his stuff, they're looking forward to reading his stuff again.
A posthumous collection. How does it feel? Because I know that you're collecting this. You've compiled all the material,
right?
And then you're editing this. So do you feel, in a way, as far as the process, do you feel like you're collaborating with your brother? And is this bringing you closer to your brother, since he did pass in 1973? Has your memory of him changed any, or how is it different since you have embarked on this collection of poetry? And if you can let us know what the title of the forthcoming book is.
Sure. Well, like I said, like when we were growing up, we weren't that close, because he had his older cousin, my cousin Servando, and I had my older cousin, where I was closer in age. And so we weren't close growing up. But it was only when we started going to San Francisco State College, we started taking ethnic studies, and he was involved in the ethnic studies classes there, and I was a beneficiary of a lot of the 68 strike and everything there. I was in an EOP program, so I was able to go to state, and we were involved in a lot of Filipino activities there, and one of them was like writing, and along with other Filipino writers like Oscar Peñaranda and Al Robles, of course, and so many other really great poets, Sam Tagatak, and the book that's coming out now that I'm getting my family to help me put it together is called Balisong, which is a Filipino name of a butterfly knife or fan knife, and he has some poems about Balisong as being, it's a unique weapon, but it's not just a weapon. It's beautiful if you look at it, the design and everything. And he wrote his last manuscript for San Francisco State, his master's thesis, and it was called Balisong, and it was a collection of about 40 poems that he did, and that's the title of the book that's going to come out in later this year.
I understand it's going to be published by Philippine American writers and artists, and it's beautiful that you are, involved in getting this out, because there's a whole generation that really needs to know about your brother Seraphin's contribution to not only Filipino American literature, but to Asian American literature as well. Lou, thank you so much. We are live here we're here in San Francisco, California, at the Manilatown Center, which is a home, one of the homes of Filipino-American culture, Filipino-American history, on the corner of 868 Kearney
I always
Street.
call Al my spiritual advisor.
Again, Lou, thank you so much.
You know, whenever I'd be kind of down and out, depressed and stuff, I would give Al a call, and he would start talk story about a manong, you know, a funny story about him, and you know, I wouldn't be so depressed after that. You know, it was just like, you know, he put everything in perspective. Anyway, this is a poem for Al. Al, this is for you. It is nothing, yet everything. It has the smell of the sweetest fragrance of sambaquita and the smell of rancid dog shit. It is the exhilaration of climbing the highest peak in the Himalayas and the suicidal urge buried in the deepest, darkest pit of despair. It is 10,000 summer suns lighting the sky and 10,000 winter storm clouds darkening all your dreams. Al, this is for you. And Margaret and Jean and Tommy and Jolamanta. These were people who worked at Manilatown back then. And every manong and manang who has ever touched your rain-soaked heart with their bagong breath and pati-stained tribal cloak. This is for you, Al, master of deflection, and all your myriad lives of loves, of daily rituals that keep you whole and vital and loving. The secret deep inside your carabao belly. You caring for the manongs and manans, your family and friends, till there's nothing left but tribal ashes in a kalinga Fillmore fire. Dance, dance, and sing your life away. This is for you, Al, and all the brothers and sisters, Joaquin, Seraphine, Ed, Ayani, Leo, Bullet, who shouted to the world that we are one with the world. We dream on stars. We are the stars, trying to interpret the shine, blinded by the brilliance, only knowing that we exist, we live with every fresh snowfall, with every passing of the seasons. Connected with nature, we are nature, light and shadow and light, connected to the stars and moons, planets, revolving around 10 billion suns. We know deep inside our hearts and minds, we connect. We belong to this divine madness, this sacred bonding with all things. We live, we love, fighting, caring deeply for our families, friends, our world. Yet this world declares that we are fools, mad men and women, pursuing things with our words, images, music, dance that they can't understand. But tell me, how do you explain the rain? What is the purpose of this life? In the question is the answer. Life itself is the purpose. Telling our stories, living them, passing it on, listening, learning, turning with the seasons, burning with the fire in our eyes. This is for you, Al. See you in the darkness. See you in the light.
I'm speaking to Henny Lee, who is a longtime community activist, and he has some really deep and very interesting history about Chinatown. Henny, thanks for agreeing to speak with us on WPVM today and Listen and Be Heard. Can you just tell us a little bit about that as it relates to the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco and Chinatown?
1906 earthquake was an event that provided opportunities for racists in San Francisco government to eliminate Chinatown. With the 1906 earthquake, earthquake impacting a large part of San Francisco, Chinatown itself was badly damaged. And their intent, the city fathers, was to remove Chinatown from its location and move it out to the boondocks. The Chinese community here realized that was going on. They quickly rebuilt everything back up, and they made Chinatown a tourist destination so that there was income coming in for the city. So the city fathers could not remove the Chinese community from the Chinatown area.
So it was a testament to, I guess, planning and also foresight in seeing what was happening, the imminent danger that was happening. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about, I think this part of town, the downtown was bedrock, and you had two communities that quickly rebuilt. I think it was the Chinese community and the Italian community.
Yeah, Chinatown is situated next to a number of very critical areas. The first one is the North Beach area, which is an Italian-American community. And their buildings were destroyed as well, and they quickly rebuilt so that they can get back into business. But it wasn't as much pressure for them as was the Chinese-American community, because racism was against Asians, Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos. Italians were not in danger of that at that time. The other community that was buttressed up to Chinatown is the Barbary Coast. And that was a series of warehouses that was right on the waterfront that was created out of fill. During the gold rush, people would come on these ships, and instead of sending the ships back empty, they would just scuttle the ships at the bay, at the port, and they would use that as the fill to create this area called the Barbary Coast, which is now, And so that was also in danger, but that was never threatened of being moved.
Yeah. And thank you again for taking the time, Henny. Are there any lessons that we can learn from that area, that time period, as it relates to today and things that happen? Are there any lessons that we can pull from that?
I think the lesson is to organize your communities to get what you want done. There's strength in numbers, and you need to be able to organize and move things along. Otherwise, people are just complaining and not doing anything about it.
Henny Lee, thank you so much.
We all know what happens when a Manong passes on. He gets talked about at home, at the barbershop, the corner store, at the neighborhood restaurant, at the pool hall, and local newsstand. But what happens when a Manong dies? We all know that his friends will reminisce about the good old days. We'll miss him when they come to Chinatown to play Pai Gao, or at the horse races, sing sad songs of long ago, tip their hats in reverence, and slowly move through life as though they will be the next in line. But what happens when a Manong dies? We all know that a Manong is an icon, the true Filipino trailblazer, pioneer. As such, there was no more dancing, or humming, or laughing, or joking, or tickling, or scratching. No more of anything. What happens when a Manong dies? We all know that the end has come to the smell of stale cigars, starched white long-sleeve collars, cufflinks, and tie clips, gray overcoats and shine shoes, pomade and greasy combs in the bathroom, and folded boxer shorts and Italian-cut undershirts. But what happens when a Manong dies? We all know that our menfolk want to cry, but they don't. And we all know that we will never smell that Old Spice aftershave lotion or hear the clink of the gold-plated keychain as it swings in motion to unlock the front door. We all know that a period of life, a slice of time, will now be looked upon in photo albums and Sony camcorder videos of Zorro kissing the grandchildren and tickling them until they lose their breath. But what happens when a manong dies? We all know that come time to clean out his closet and dress his drawers, his wife, his children, and quite possibly his grandchildren will find things they never knew about him. Girly magazines, nude women playing cards, unused condoms, Las Vegas and Reno $1 coins, pictures of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, bank books dated 1937 and earlier, and a set of extra false teeth, his union card, his money clip, wrinkled and torn photos of him and his barcada in their army uniforms and their cook and waiter outfits, and a 1941 snapshot of he and his friends standing on the footbridge in Central Park, New York, dressed to the nines. What happens when a manong dies? Please, someone, tell me what happens when she dies. We simply know, because it rains softly and ever so gently. The winds caress each other rather than blow us farther and farther apart. The skies open up to reveal a scene of willowy clouds and turquoise sky, and the pots and pans in the kitchen lay still, even though trickles of water tap down from the faucet. No one talks about the fierceness she exhibited when the white ladies tried to grab her child because her child hit one of theirs. No one utters a word to tell of her stories, trying to keep the apartment clean, the kids clean, the food clean, everything clean before the manong came home. No one remembers when the elevators weren't working and she had to climb 7 flights of stairs, carrying 2 baskets of groceries. No one praised her fine stitching on the corduroy jumper she made for one of her daughters, all the while being berated in front of the workshop by the sewing teacher. No one thought to give her a birthday present. When she turned 34, it was just another cold October day in New York City or San Francisco or Santa Clara. Nope, I guess no one knows what happens when a manong dies, but we do. The skies part. The spraying of brilliant sun and a sweeping rainbow that covers the entire sky. Flora and fauna genuflect and birds sing so sweetly. We have lost a manong. We have lost a crone, a wise old lady, a teller of tales, and a kitchen witch. She commanded the highest respect from all of the cleaning utensils like the vacuum and the worn-out sponge. The pots and pans she used for over 33 years clink and clank as news of her passing reaches the kitchen. And even the laundromat across the street reaches the kitchen. And in the laundromat across the street, washers and dryers spin out of control upon hearing of her death. Objects she used daily stand at attention, weeping silently, and angered upon learning that her life was measured by the deep, dark circles that shadowed her eyes, not by the love and respect she so deserved. What happens when a manong dies? The earth moans and groans, a mournful song, a song of loss and deep, deep pain. A pillar has tumbled. A pillar has left us. A sister woman who withstood the test of time has left us, and we mourn. And then we tuck her memory away deep in our hearts and soul, for the loss is too great to deal with at the moment. This is for my mother.
Yeah. We have a wonderful brother here who's involved with the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. He's the educational director, Jeffrey Aceto. Jeffrey, thanks for taking time to talk to us. Now, you were born in the Philippines and you grew up in Hawaii. Is that correct?
Yes. Born in the Ilocos, grew up in Kalihi, Hawaii.
Kalihi, Hawaii. Okay. You had mentioned something earlier in conversation that in Hawaii, there was something called the Hawaiian Renaissance, and that it was a multi-generational thing where it was a community really reclaiming their culture. Can you talk about that? Because in light of what happened in Maui, people in North Carolina may not be familiar with, like the reclamation of language and culture. And, if you could maybe share some of that with us.
Yeah, and I think the sort of inspired by the Native Hawaiian movement and the Renaissance, particularly, I think culminating in 93 with the Apology Bill. They forced the United States government and Bill Clinton's administration to say that they were illegally occupied. Right. And so that in 93, that was known as the Apology Bill. Yeah. But that whole Renaissance really started from Native Hawaiians saying we need to learn our language because it was lost. Yeah. Not only lost, it was banned by settlers and occupiers, basically the United States. And so it started Aha Punaneleo, started by Native Hawaiian families, learning the languages, forcing the parents, not forcing, but having the parents who both speak and then the children be involved in learning their languages. And from learning their languages, ritual, dance, hula, reclamation of kaho'olawe, all of that Renaissance that started in the 70s and inspired by the occupation of Alcatraz.
That's fantastic. And, with everything that's happened in Maui right now with the fire, can you speak to that? Because, there's a legacy of colonization and how that extractive economy has had a large impact on the land and on regular people, working people. If you could maybe just share your feelings about that.
Yeah, first of all, Lahaina was wetlands. Lahaina is not a dry city at all and dry town. It's historically been green and been plush, but because of colonization, particularly two things, right? The military owns at least 25% of Hawaii, and then also the ag lands, the Big Five diverted water away from particular communities, Lahaina in this one, that contributed to the dryness of Lahaina. So this fire shouldn't have blazed if the waterways and the Aina was continued to be nourished and allowed to flourish.
One of the organizers and former state senators in Maui said that it was not a natural disaster, that it was a man-made disaster. He really made the distinction between that. Now, you're involved with the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. I know you were a professor in Hawaii. Can you just tell us briefly about what you do at Manilatown, as an educator, as it relates to some of the programs in maintaining and spreading the awareness of Filipino American history?
Yeah, so part of my duties here is to sort of help with outreach, help with teaching our young folks, particularly through tours and the language programs we have here at Manilatown. I teach on Saturdays Ilocano language, which is really the first time I thought that Ilocano has been taught formally here, maybe in the West Coast, maybe in the United States. I don't know that, but I haven't found it in any university, in any community program, except here in Manilatown, San Francisco.
That's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that and being a resource and being a good example of how we can develop and build community. Again, this is Tony Robles, Listen and Be Heard Radio, speaking with Jeffrey Aceto, who's the educational program director at Manilatown. If, for our WPVM listeners that want to know more about Manilatown Heritage Foundation, go to manilatown.org. That's www.manilatown.org. Again, this is Listen and Be Heard Radio. on WPVM FM, the voice of Asheville. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Next poem was dedicated from, this was about a Filipino-American mural that was created in San Francisco State. And it's called Poem for Mural at San Francisco State. Yeah, great title. Huh? Flips to computer chips and back again. Replayed, recorded, reviewed, and renewed for a new generation. A 34-year journey continues as bridges are crossed and borders blur. Still thirsty, I draw from many sources, old and new. I dip my cup and draw a full measure from the well, again and again. Listening to young voices, taking it to another level, continuing the journey. Making connections with the motherland, shaking up the tree, let the mangoes and coconuts fall and crack up a few ice-cold San Miguel super drives to go with sizzling sisig, crispy pata, and blue marlin belly. Sarap. Pulutan for the soul. My US dollar goes a long way there. Besides, I'm tired of peanuts, popcorn, and pretzels. It's just too salty. Give me more of that crackling, sweet, sour, tangy taste. I listen in my dreams to Bayani and my brother Seraphin, speaking to me in language that is heard in Kulantam gongs, reverberating across the sea. Listening to nose flips whistling in the Baguio wind. I follow the trail forged by Larry Idleong and Philip Veracruz, Bill Sorrow and Bullet Marsigan, and the godfather of Asian American poetry, as well as my longtime spiritual advisor, Al Robles. Learning the lesson, I'm privileged there really is to know and to have known them, but only his friends, teachers, and kapabayans, walking the same, discovering and uncovering alongside them in the American history and heritage, orchards, celebrating the here and now, our rich and diverse culture. There are borders to erase and bridges still to be crossed. Thank you.
So, Tony, you and I are both writers, and I guess it's our passion for writing and books that has brought us together to present this show to people in Asheville and around the world and around the country, to bring writers from the Carolinas to the world and writers from around the world to the Carolinas as well. And you're going to teach a class at, let me let you tell people about the class first.
Well, it's a class that I'm going to be teaching in short fiction at Blue Ridge Community College at the Brevard campus. There's a couple of campuses, one in Hendersonville where I live, and then there's another one in Brevard, which is about a half hour's drive. And they needed one in Brevard. The need there was more urgent. So I'll be doing short fiction. It's basic short fiction. I did have a workshop scheduled for the Great Smokies writing program at UNC Asheville that unfortunately was canceled because they didn't get enough sign-ups. But, that happens.
Yeah,
things happen.
Or maybe you have to try again and get the word out a little better next time.
Yeah, or sometimes, there are things that are happening concurrently. I mean,
right.
The workshop was supposed to happen on a Saturday, so a little disappointed about that. But like you said,
But I thought we'd take the opportunity, since you're working on a syllabus, I guess, for that class and so on. And since we're both writers and you're going to be teaching this class about short fiction, and our show is really for writers as much as readers. We talk about craft, we talk about the business of writing. So I thought maybe we could get down a little deeper into some of the things that go into both creating short fiction and then maybe the business of short fiction as well. Like if you've written some great short stories, then how do you go about bringing them to the world? So I thought we could start with just maybe talking about what is short fiction, like how short is short fiction?
Something that you could read in one sitting. That's one sitting. That's one of the definitions. Something, okay. That, and then also the difference, one of the distinctions between short stories, short fiction and novels is the fact that in novels you have a lot of subplots that are not the main plot, but can mirror or parallel the main plot. Whereas in a short story, you have less time to develop. You have to kind of get to the point. And so that's one distinction. But the other part too is where they both have these common things in character. You're developing a character with depth. So you want to develop a character using subtext. You have
what is subtext?
Subtext is you could call the subtext the inner life or the backstory of your characters. So if you were to look at, let's say, if you were to look at a character like, let's say, Mr. Potato Head, you attach a nose, eyes, eyebrows, a pipe, lips. Those are external things, but that doesn't really give you any markers of the depth of a character. That's all external. Whereas, when you start getting into the inner life of a character or the backstory, you go from Potato Head to the dramatic, I guess, acting philosopher named Konstantin Stanislavski, who said that, when you develop a character, you are building a character. So you're making conscious choices about your character, which develops that character. So the conscious choices are, in the life of that character, their background, the
and
things
so you might present the subtext with dialogue or thoughts or descriptions still even.
Yes. Like thoughts, the thoughts could be the inner conflict. The internal conflict. You have an external conflict. Let's say you see a guy coming down the street, he wants to beat the hell out of you. Okay, we get it, right? But then you have inner conflict, where it's that it's internal. You want to do something, but part of you is telling you, no, you shouldn't. you
and
shouldn't
so that comes down to choices, I think, about narration and like who's telling the story. That's pretty important. Like, is it the main character telling you the story, and are they actually a trustworthy narrator, or do you have like an all-seeing narrator? Those are important choices to make.
Yeah, I mean, the omniscient narrator is like can see everything, and then you have the first person, which is, I, right, telling me and I, and then you have the second person, which is you, which there are advantages to each one of them. When I was doing my novel, I first wrote it from the first person. Then I realized that writing it from the second person would have been better. That I was losing something in the voice because the voice was so strong in the narrative. I ended up writing the novel over again.
So you went all the way back and changed all of that.
I changed it. Yeah.
And how much did that actually, like, it wasn't just about changing it from I to you or something like that. You really had to change the whole.
Well, the thing was, I based my main character on my father, and that can be a little dangerous. That can present some challenges because if you're too close to someone,
right?
If you're
so
too close
originally,
to your character,
it was in your father's voice.
It was in my father's. It was in my father's. It was. In the first person from the perspective of my father.
Right.
But I just found that doing
and
it.
Now it was based on your father. It's not like actually a biography of your father.
No, it was kind of loosely based on my dad. But when you're too close, sometimes it doesn't allow for the imagination. it can be constraining. It could be a straitjacket to your plot. When you're too close, when you know too much, it's a constraint on your imagination. It can hinder. And that's what I realized when I wrote that first draft, when I was going over it. I was like, wow, I'm being too nice to this character, you have too much regard. I mean, especially if you're writing about your father, See, that's one of the dangers when you're writing about true. If you stick too close to the truth, it's going to be great to you, but to the person reading it, they may not pick up on the same thing,
Right. It's just a story. They don't know what's true, what's not true.
Exactly.
They don't know you. They don't know the person you're writing about. I'm kind of struggling with that myself with the story I'm working on right now, which is kind of loosely based on my life, but it's like I'm using my life to help me amplify this story. And so some of the things I'm talking about are true, but they're only partly true.
So I guess
it's like choices you have to make about like, why am I using this? Is it like, am I using this because it happened to me and I just want to tell people about it? Or am I using this because it works with the story?
Yeah.
That's one thing.
I totally get it,
But I wanted to ask you too, like, the famous writer's block. So when you set about with projects, like you want to write one short story. So, and like you said, that's one sitting. So I don't know how many pages that translates to, maybe 20 pages, 30 pages?
For a short story, maybe 20. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 20.
You sit down and like you say, okay, I'm going to write a short story. It should only take me a week.
But there's some that,
Then maybe you sit there for the first 3 days and you don't write anything. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah. I mean, there are times when, a short story might take a long time. I mean, one of the advisors I had at Vermont, Mike Crowley, he wrote a story called Satellites that won him the NEA. That was part of his sample that he sent. Uh-huh. He wrote 40 drafts of that thing.
40 drafts.
40. I've never written 40 drafts of anything.
But was it a short story?
It was a short story that it won him the NEA grant. And what he realized was that in what was missing in his story is that something has to happen. There has to be some action. It can't be on the periphery. So, the story was some guy was raising wild animals up on a hill, and they all got loose, right? And the public was thinking, well, they told the public that all the animals had been shot, no danger. But he finds out from a trusted neighbor, hey, they're still out there. They're up in the hills. You can hear them at night. Lions. So he had I guess in early drafts, he had the lions kind of on the periphery, this impending danger. But then he realized that he had to bring that lion into the story, which he did, which he did. But it took 40, as he tells it, I was at the lecture when
40 drafts. So that could have took him a year then.
40 rewrites, yeah. I've known people like that, though, that have rewritten one story 30 and 40 times or even more.
Now, if you start thinking about a volume of short stories, then that represents a lot of work if you're going to do 40 drafts of each story.
Yeah.
So, when you think about writing short stories, maybe we could talk a second about what somebody's goal is. Like, okay, I think for all of us, the main goal is just to tell a story, to fulfill that urge to tell a story, to write a story. Other than our goal to get a message across and to tell a story, there's also what goal we have for that story once it's written. Are we trying to just write it and throw it in a drawer? Are we trying to write it and make it part of a volume of stories? Or what? Like, do you have collections of poetry? Do you have a collection of short stories that you're trying to pull together into a volume?
Yeah, I've gotten amassed kind of a collection of short stories. I'd like to get those published at some point. I'd love to do a collection of essays as well. I happen to love essays as a form. I like essays about as much as I like, if not more than short stories.
Mm-hmm.
But like what we're trying to accomplish with the short story, they say that the best storytelling deals with experiences and not events. Events being kind of external, whereas experiences are about what develops in the people to whom the events happen. So, we're trying to shed our own vision, shed a unique light on a situation, and to take you out of reality for, an hour or however length of time it takes you to,
or at least your own reality,
your own reality,
to somebody else's.
Yeah. And that's, that appeals to me with short fiction, that you can, there are people that describe themselves as marathoners or sprinters.
Right.
Short story folks are sprinters and poets are sprinters. Whereas novelists, man, they're, they're the marathonists or the marathon runners,
But it's a tough market for short stories. You have to really work hard at submitting them, figuring out where to submit them, and basically you're trying to get them published in periodicals and maybe in anthologies before you can even really think. I think it may be rare for people to just have a volume of short stories published without first having them published here and there in different places.
Well, they say, I've also heard that it's preferable, or actually it's easier to get a short story collection published after you've done a novel.
Okay.
They say it's kind of hard.
You got to run the marathon and then you can do the sprints.
Yeah, they say it's kind of they say it's kind of hard actually to get a short story collection.
I think it really is. And not only that, is hard to even just get a short story published. I remember one of your guests was talking about that. I think it was Darren Todd. He was talking about getting some of his horror stories published and really saying that it's a meritocracy when it comes to that the competition is so fierce that, he even said you can only hope that they actually read your story.
I guess.
So I don't want to discourage people because that can feel a little discouraging when you think about it like that. But that's why I was asking about, when you think about crafting a story, what are some of the motivations? Why are you doing it? If you're doing it just to get published, then you have a steep hill to climb, even if you're a great writer. And some of the great writers who do get some of their stories published also get many of them rejected as well. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the other thing is craft too. It takes skill to really do a good short story. I've often heard it said that it's harder to write a good short story than it is to write a novel. There's more to it, that you have to get the attention quickly, and there's more development. It's like you need a hook. I wanted to say two things. One is that, like, if you are discouraged and you have not gotten published, one thing that I started doing back in the early 90s, it was one of the reasons why I started an open mic and a storytelling event, was because I just wanted to go ahead and share what I was doing, whether I was getting published or not. And that turned into Listen and Be Heard, open mic. And I think that's something for people to really think about, because you are in a community. You don't have to apply like if you're in an MFA program or something. You're just in a community of people who want to share what they're writing, and that can be a great thing. And then the other thing was that I was writing these short stories. They were biographical stories about fascinating people in history. And I would read sometimes 2 or 3 books. If they had an autobiography, then I would read their autobiography for certain. But then I would be sitting there thinking, now, how do I tell this person's story in 5 minutes? And the truth is that you can't. And so you need to find what you find interesting or some part of their story that you're going to focus in on and make that your story.
Doing the interviews on Listen and Be Heard Radio, I'm dealing with people that have collections of poetry and short stories. And, I can't read every single story, but, if I get a collection, I'll read 3 or 4 and I'll kind of hone in on a theme. And then it'll just organically take off during an interview, during a conversation. And speaking of short stories, this is a new short story collection, and it's called When the Hibiscus Falls by Evelina Galang. She's a Filipino-American author. She's a teacher at one of the universities in Florida. Now, she's written a couple of novels, and this is, I guess, maybe her second short story collection.
So there's an example of what you were talking about. She wrote some novels, and now she has this short story collection coming out.
This just came out. This is published by Coffee House Press. And I'm reading, I was at a coffee house today reading it,
Nice.
And so I read
and
about
you'll be speaking with her soon, right?
Yeah, I'll be speaking to her in a couple of days. She's actually on the book tour for this. So she's going from different place to place across the country. So it's, I feel fortunate to get an audience with her,
Well, that's great.
Well, for folks that, want to explore craft further, there is an excellent book by Clint McCown. It's called Mr. Potato Head versus Freud.
I like the title.
This is a really, really, really good book on basic craft in fiction. He was one of my advisors at Vermont. Well, actually, he wasn't my advisor. I was in workshop with him. Mm-hmm. It was a workshop on how to open your novel. And the workshop, had about 6-7 people in it. And we all had to submit our novel openings, which were, 8, 9, 10 pages. And then we read it, and then we chimed in and gave each other feedback. But a very good book. I'm finding it very helpful. In fact, for my class at Brevard, I'm going to be drawing from a lot of that.
So give our listeners the details about your class in Brevard one more time.
Yes. You know what? I don't have the dates in front of me. I guess I could give that at another time. But it's Blue Ridge Community College, Brevard campus. It's going to start in late October, and there's going to be 2 sessions. The first session is 6 classes, then the second session is 6 classes. And all the sessions, the classes are going to be pretty much the same. And I'm going to be just talking about the elements of writing short fiction. And it's going to be, what's the buzzword? Generative, which means that we're going to be writing stuff in the class.
You're going to generate some short fiction, huh?
So generative, And then we're going to get some examples of setting, right? And character development. We'll be reading from authors like Luis J. Rodriguez, who I love, Ron Rash, and other folks,
All right. Well, thank you, Tony.
Boadicea was bad. She couldn't be any other way, because everyone she knew was tough and terrible. You wouldn't want to cross any of them, or your skull might wind up hanging around the neck of their favorite battle horse. But if you didn't cross her, Boadicea was a gasser. She'd drink you under the table and then carry you home, which really turned the king on. And he turned her on, too. So they did it right, and soon there were a couple of princesses keeping the palace up during the wee hours of the night. They kept on digging each other, and the princesses ripened like sweet peaches. But one day, the king woke up and he wasn't feeling so good, and the next day, he was dead. Now, Boadicea was broke up a bit, but she didn't break apart. The king had arranged for half his loot to go to Nero because he figured if he didn't, Nero would take it anyway. The other half he left to the light of his life. So Boadicea figured she was the ruling queen now and she could live with that. But there was a real hang-up Boadicea didn't know anything about. Nero wasn't feeling so agreeable the day he read the king's will, you see, so he sent some slick soldiers to take everything, even the princess's cherries. And they did. And while they were at it, they whipped Boadicea out in the square where everyone could get a good look at what was going on. Now, Boadicea, she wasn't one to cry or take anything laying down, and Nero, he never thought a woman would do anything but cry and lie down. Boadicea, she figured she had nothing left to lose. The time had come to kick ass, especially since everyone as far as she could walk in any direction was as salty with Nero as she was. So she got them all together in one place and started rapping to them. Everyone who knocked their ears to her speech started remembering all the little things and the big things that the Romans had laid on them too. Soon they were all seeing red. Now all the Romans around were living in the same town, and if they could have heard the way Boadicea was carrying on, they would have split without packing any bags. They never knew what hit them. When Boadicea and her crew were through, there was nothing left but a few inches of superheated charcoal, which is still there today if you want to go looking for it. Well, when word got back to Nero, he sent his right-hand muscle man, a stud named Silenius, to straighten everything out. So Silenius comes along a couple months later with a couple hundred men, and when he gets a look at Boadicea and her hordes, and all the mamas and kiddies camped out picnicking like war is nothing but a great big show, well, he turned around and let them burn down the next town, like they did the last one, without even warning the Roman settlers what was coming around. Boadicea hung a few more skulls around the neck of her horse, and Silenius sent word back to Nero that he needed a few more men in order to handle the situation correctly. So Boadicea keeps carrying on, riding her chariot across the Brittany landscape, removing Romans and thinking that Nero wasn't all he'd been cracked up to be. And he wasn't. But his soldiers were tougher than he was, and they didn't come with their families, and they had sharper swords than Boadicea would ever lay her hands on. So when enough of these bad boys got together, they went to break up the picnic. And it didn't take them very long either. When Boadicea saw the situation, she finished herself and her daughters off before anyone else could. Boadicea was bad. She couldn't be any other way.
From Korea to Manilatown to ancient Brittany, we have been telling women's stories today, among other things. Next week, we will hear from M. Evelina Galang when Tony Robles speaks with her about when the hibiscus falls. If you would like to do a little homework before then, you can go to mevelinagalang.com, where you will see, as Tony mentioned previously, that before this collection of short stories was published, she had several novels previously published. We'll go now to a spoken word set contributed by our new co-producer, DJ Jeannie Hopper.
Time to try something new that everyone in the world can do. Treat those the way that you treat you. View each new day a dream come true. Time to try something new that everyone in the world can do. Treat those the way that you treat you. View each new day a dream come true. Just because the world's gone wrong doesn't give you any reason not to sing this song. Birds are chirping, skies bright blue. Plenty of people doing worse than you. Homeless, hungry, suffering from disease. Seems every morning we should hit our knees. Pledge praise to the power who provides us air. Stop moaning, groaning about your despair. Care about your loved ones, care about yourself. Forget about fame and a world where wealth rules rules the way we think, what we believe, causing pain, shame, so many to grieve. For those they've lost and still might lose. You got a choice, but will you choose hate over hope, dope, death, despair? It really won't take much to show the world we care. A simple handshake, a mile-wide smile. You'd be surprised, it lasts a while. Style's not substance, what glitters not gold. Hunger, hatred, man is getting old. Time to try something new that everyone in the world can do. Treat those the way that you treat you. View each new day a dream come true. Time to try something new that everyone in the world can do. Treat those the way that you treat you. View each new day a dream come true. Time to try something new that every time to try something new that every time to try something new. I'm out.
Welcome to the planet, my child, wild west of the Milky Way. Before you undertake this crazy trip, you should know every inch of you's a latent controversy. From the hair on your head to the spots on your chin, the color of your cradle, the shade of your skin. Always someone willing to forge weapons against them. Looking to shatter you so they can name the scars for you, spawning sickness so they can sell the cure to you. Despite the £1,000,000 pitch, our bodies are temples in the god complexes of the rich. But money will never have the power to make the earth spin. Profit is ravenous, a dark mirror held up to the hearts of all of us. Tightrope walking round and around this world wide web. Weaving spiders can never be sated. May you grow to be an ever-loving bane of their existence. Together we will live in our power, so much greater than this. Greater than the terror of the bigots in high office. Strength to dig as deep as we need to withstand the storms of their greed. On this wild trip, may you go armed with love, true grit. May your heart be an equal planet. Because to love yourself is radical, essential for your arsenal. Your body is a castle, whole within and of your soul be an equal planet.
If I told you what I know, you would not believe me. So I will tell you what I do not know. I do not know how bad it will get before things get better. How many more we will lose to drought and flood, fire and famine, to mass incarceration, mass extinction, to hate crime and domestic violence, to the police, to TV and toxic food. How many more we will lose to pollution of our waterways and airwaves and bloodstreams, our livers and rivers and oceans and imaginations. How many to the war on terror and drugs and Crips and Bloods and thugs and babies and gays and immigrants and indigenous peoples and differently abled and madly genius and schizophrenically gifted, and the war on thinking and the war on love. How many more we will lose to the lust for enough money to bribe God to turn the other way. If I told you what I know, love is stronger than hate. And truth is more enduring than any form that lies can take. If you are not willing to change, I know nothing will change. Life is teetering on the precipice of our willingness to let go of what is killing us and the earth's forgiveness for what we have spoiled. Regeneration is the natural order of existence. Destiny will give birth to itself, re-spiraling the cycle of the universe's chest rising with each breath. Will we be there to exhale?
Inside feels like you're always chasing, trying to catch up, running around in circles, don't know who to follow. If you know, tell me who's got the map. Who are you living for? What are the asking for? Trying to be everyone's favorite weighs you down every day while you parade in the frenzy. Be careful not to run far from home. Why you feeling what you're feeling? Do you lead with intuition? Where do we go to find some serenity? Stop looking out too far. Try listening within. Follow the resonance of truth. Live in liberation. Who are you living for? What are they asking for? Trying to be everyone's favorite weighs you down every day while you parade in the frenzy. Be careful not to run far from home.
conversations, too much information. Oh. Man, he said
talking, you get a word in edgewise, and you can come clean. We didn't barely meet yet, I wanna know your secret. Hidden variations, if you know what I mean. Curiosity requires that I know all your desires, and rise a little higher to stay on the scene. Holler back, Cisco, where did all the time go? It takes some contemplation, if you know what I mean. Go ahead and say it, you better not delay it. It takes a little while to get a word in between.
Tighten up your view, sir. It's time to face the future. The only way a remnant can survive. Continuation, candid observation, the hidden conversations of our lives.
Yeah, listen to the hipsters, all the cries and whispers. Ain't about nothing if you know what I mean. Is it contradiction? Is it fact or fiction? Personal affliction for the ears of the queen. And he was like, and she was like, and they was like, and we was like. Hidden conversations if you know what I mean. Gossip, talk show, hidden in your window. Running down somebody that's new on the scene.
Tighten up your view, sir. It's time to face the future. The only way a remnant can survive. Continuation of candid observation, the hidden conversations of our lives. Tighten up your views, sir. Time to face the future.
Tuned to WPVM Radio 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina, and WPVMFM.org worldwide. The show is Listen and Be Heard, and my name is Martha Senator. We've been treated to a spoken word set entirely provided by DJ Jeannie Hopper, our new co-producer. Courtesy of Reg E. Gaines, the artist, we heard Just Because. We heard Warriors of the Disotech from Fear of an Equal Planet, the Scrimshire remix, featuring Abby Oliveira. And then, If I Told You What I Know by Climbing Poetry is the dynamic duo of Alexia and Naimi from their full-length album Intrinsic. They come out of today's movement music scene. Alexia is the sister of Leah Penniman, who authored Farming While Black. Penniman is a Black Creole farmer and food justice activist from Soul Fire Farm in Grafton, New York, a farm she founded in 2010 with the mission to end racism in the food system and reclaim our ancestral connection to land. Some listeners might remember the conversation that I had with Laura Legnick about Penniman. And Listen to Be Heard, we actually did reach out to try to bring Penniman to the airwaves. And I hope we will in the future, but apparently right now she's on a sabbatical. And so we wish her well with whatever she is doing during that time. And I'm sure that at some point we will hear about what she has been up to. After that, we heard Resonance of the Truth by Bokani Dyer, who is a pianist, composer, and music producer who comes by way of South Africa. Resonance of Truth is the first single released from his 2023 album Radio Seshaba, released on Giles Peterson's Brownswood Records. And then the last thing we were listening to was Hidden Conversations by Terry Callier. It's the title track from his 2009 full-length album released on Mr. Bongo Records. The album is a collaboration with the trio Massive Attack, both out of the UK. So thank you, DJ Jeannie Hopper, for that spoken word set. And you could look forward to hearing more of the up-to-date spoken word, a lot of it mixed with dance music and other types of tracks and mixes from around the globe, because DJ Jeannie Hopper is in touch with all of that. And we're glad to have her participating and helping us out with, you got to put your feelers out everywhere. And hopefully after a while, people think of you when they want to let people know that they've created something new and wonderful. And if you are one of those people, please do get in touch and let us know what it is that you've created. And if you would like us to read it and perhaps interview you or listen to it and play it on these airwaves, you can send email to editor@listenandbeheard.net or go to our website, listenandbeheard.net, where you will also find unedited Zoom interviews that Tony and I have conducted, and columns written by people who you do not even hear on these airwaves, but who write wonderful, informative, educational columns that you may find interesting. And while you're there, you can sign up so that you get alerted by email. Become one of our subscribers. We're trying to hit it to 1,000, and we still have a little ways to go, but you will benefit because you'll just know what's up, who's coming up. Maybe you even want to do a little homework so that you've read some of what some of these future authors we're going to speak to have written. I want to thank my co-producers, Tony Robles and DJ Jeannie Hopper, and also Jay Rodriguez Sierra, who contributes loops and other background sound for this production. You can look up Jay at jrodriguezsierra.com or hit him up on Instagram at jrodriguezsierra. As always, thank you to Davian Dial, the general manager of WPVM, for allowing us to present this show to you here in Asheville and to you worldwide on WPVMFM.org. My name is Martha Senator, and it's been my pleasure to bring this show to you for the last 2 hours. I want to thank you for listening and for the opportunity to be heard.
Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is loving a man you're not supposed to love. It's giving way to emotions, creating commotions, calling attention to yourself. And I got that. Living it is learning from someone who can actually show you. It's cleaning your teacher's house or helping her to find one. It's never ever saying J-O-B. Living it is a one-way ticket and no solid plans. It's smoking a J in a smoke cafe in Amsterdam. It's saying the day is pretty in a strange new city. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. putting all of your charms and attributes, every single one of them, to good use. It's knowing the kindness of strangers and love for sale. Living it is knowing where to buy rice and beans in bulk. It's knowing herbs are cheaper than doctors. It's keeping it together when you're falling apart. It's writing poetry to ease a broken heart. Living it is knowing the stage, looking into bright lights, late nights, barroom fights, fantastic sights, inspiration, and moving on, 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 and moving on. Because living it is giving it. Giving it is having it to give. Having it to give is taking it, snatching it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is being responsible for your own groove. It's playing on street corners for nickels and centines and being asked to move. It's sleeping in roofless squats in ancient convents. It's running up against police, getting thrown into the streets where you belong. Because living it is subletting. Living it is knowing your feet belong on the ground. That life is a dream, that things are never, ever, ever, ever what they seem. And the certainty that the good things, the really, really, really good things,